You used a word a couple minutes ago that I would love to hear more about. You said it's something that you do called resonance, where you're listening to the silence between the words. And I love that. And that's one of those things that I know it's going to be hard to put it into English language, but if you could explain a little further, I'd love that.
Okay. Well, I have to give credit to my students, because I started teaching medical intuition in person a few years ago throughout Southern and Northern California. And then during the pandemic, I started a medical intuition certificate course online on Zoom. And while I was teaching it, one of the cohorts, I remember I got to this point where I said, oh, I have this other gift I use, but I don't know what it's called. And so I described it, and one of my students said, oh, resonance. And so I thought, oh, that's a perfect name for it. And so here's what it is. I don't like my clients to talk a lot, but some clients do need to talk, and that's okay. But as a medical intuitive, we don't get information from what the client says. We get it from their body, right? Or we get it energetically. And so often what they say is irrelevant to a large extent. And so I don't ask for medical histories. I don't ask for the history of the illness. I just say, what's your question, or what's your symptom, or what's the body part you want me to look at? And it can be something as vague as, I'm tired all the time. Tell me why, right? And so, but some people might talk a little more. They might say, well, I have this problem with ringing in my ears, and I've had it for 10 years, and I've tried everything, right? That's the statement they make. While they're making that statement, I'm mostly not listening to them. Not in a disrespectful way, but just in a way of like, I'm trying to listen to something else. And so I'm listening to the sound behind the sound of their words. And so I'll actually, it's like there's two audio tracks running. They're saying, I have ringing in the ears, it's been going on for 10 years. And then I'm hearing at the same time, confusion. I might hear like confusion. And then that'll let me know that there's a mental aspect to this condition around confusion, or that the ringing in the ears is causing a lot of mental confusion, right? So there'll be this additional information. It's like stuff they didn't say, but it's still a part of what they're saying. And so I call that resonance. And I'm describing it probably not totally accurately, because it's not as clear as clairaudience. It's not necessarily always a word. Sometimes it's a feeling. So it's not it's not a clear like clairaudience or clairsentience. It's kind of a mixture of clairaudience and clairsentience, which is why I call it something else.
Yeah, what it's reminding me of, have you seen the movie Contact with Jodie Foster?
I think so.
Well, there's a scene in the movie where they're receiving this information from the radio telescopes from space, and they're watching. I don't have the scientific words, but they're watching the pulsations on the screen. And one of them realizes, wait, there's a second signal in there, and they do their manipulations, whatever it is they do scientifically, and they realize that beneath the audio track there's a video signal as well, so they have to break that down so they can see and hear. And that's kind of what it sounds like.
It's very similar. Yeah, it is like that. It's like an extra track of information embedded in that you have to. Yeah, it's definitely like that. And it's vibrational. So it's also hard to describe because it doesn't correlate exactly with senses like the other clairs do. It's vibrational. But it's coming from them. It's coming from the voice as they're speaking. It's coming from not the words, but the vibration of the voice. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by this. Is this something? Well, let's go back to you. You teach the classes online. What sort of things do you teach in your class? And do you find it a challenge to teach medical intuition online, or is it just the same as being in person?
Yeah, I don't find it to be any different. And that's probably because prior to the pandemic, I was already seeing clients online. And so I have clients in other countries who would do sessions with me on Zoom. And so when the pandemic hit, I I hadn't been teaching any classes on Zoom, but I just moved them online, and it wasn't a problem because this type of work doesn't require that you are in the same room with the person. Like I said, when I first started out doing this, I did it all remotely. In fact, I didn't do in-person sessions the first few years that I was practicing. I used to just do them all remotely and send a written report. And I actually transitioned to in-person because it was easier. It was less work. When I was doing it remotely, I was just getting way too much information and typing up these massive reports, and it wasn't cost effective. Once I started getting so many clients, I couldn't keep it up. And I realized that in person, I could get information, just an hour's worth of info. I could kind of delimit the work to 1 hour instead of working on it for so long. And, that was better. Of course, some psychics, I suppose if there wasn't a pandemic, some of my students might have preferred to learn in person because maybe it would be easier for some psychics who are used to working that way. That's just a crutch. That's just a habit. Like I told you, I was taught, I had a lot of different teachers. I was taught in Native American, Jamaican, Trinidadian, African American traditions and spiritualists. And so I had a lot of different teachers teaching me different things. So I learned to be adaptable and flexible. And I learned to combine those different ways of doing things. And so I have no rigidity of one tradition. And so, but some people do, and that can be a crutch where they only want to work in person, or they only want to work with certain tools, or, they have certain things that they have to have. And, what I teach is that you should be able to work under any circumstances if needed. And of course, we want to work in ideal circumstances to be at our best. But sometimes you have to work in other circumstances, and that's okay. So I didn't find any problem with teaching online. But with regard to your other question, how did I teach online? Was that your other question?
It was one of them. Yes. I've got so many questions.
How do I teach it? For many years, I didn't know if it could be taught because I was not taught it by a medical intuitive. I had gifts my whole life. I have lots of teachers. I did a lot of instruction, but I didn't have someone who specifically taught me how to be a medical intuitive. I should say I didn't have someone human. I have spirit teachers that have worked with me my whole life. And so they've been with me my whole life. And I saw when I first started doing healing work, I had these spirit doctors who used to, be right here and directing me. And so I thought, can I teach this? But my students kept asking me to teach it. And so what I did was I just began to reflect on my process, the process I had developed to do medical intuition over years. And I call it the VEST protocol, and it's a series of steps. And so I teach those steps to my students. And I say, the reason I'm teaching you this way is because this is the way I work. And you may work a different way after you train with me. You may add on other steps or remove steps, but I'm giving you a foundation and I'm teaching you what I know, right? Which is all you could teach. You have to teach from where you come. And so my protocol involves teaching them how to develop, how to do a clairvoyant scan, for example, how to scan somebody like an MRI and actually see problems in the body, how to zoom into a problem clairvoyantly, how to clairsentiently take your aura and wrap it over your client and pull their symptoms into your body, and then to begin to examine yourself like you're in a doctor's office, how to connect with an organ and begin a dialogue, what questions to ask. And so I have this process that I teach them. And, I didn't know when I started if it was going to work. And my students are a mixture of like healthcare workers and psychics and healers. And it works. Somehow the VEST protocol works. And that's what my students say. They were able to use it. Like I have a lot of them, they're already in practice. Like they're already a nurse. They're already a massage therapist. I have one who's like an acupuncturist who runs an acupuncture school. And they said they were able to take what I taught them and immediately, like after the training, begin to incorporate it into their practice. So apparently it works.
Thanks for listening. Check out Castle Gate, a novel based on my own ancestral healing journey, at lisabonis.com. In 1921, 4 men set off from Scotland to the United States. Will Garrock, his brother Pete, his son Willie, and his nephew Thomas, all coal miners. They left behind the miners' rows and the nationwide mining strike with its soup kitchens. Their destination was Castlegate, Utah, where they had kin to welcome them before sending for their wives and children. They prospered in America, working in one of the finest mines in Utah. Until that tragic day, March 8th, 1924. Disaster struck. 3 explosions, trapping 171 men inside. Rescue crews worked tirelessly for days, but sadly, they could not save a soul. Women were widowed and children were orphaned, and some never recovered from their broken hearts. Castlegate is the true and tragic saga of a Scottish family whose dreams of finding their fortunes in the bountiful coal mines of Castlegate, Utah during the Prohibition era explode in one of the most devastating mine disasters in American history. Learn more at lisabonis.com.